Good morning, Colleen. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us this morning. You're joining us from Canada, I believe, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And what time in the morning is it right
All
now?
right, now it's 10 a.m., so quite civilized, actually.
Very nice, very nice. I hope you've had breakfast now.
Yes, what about you? What time is it where you are?
It's about 8:30 in the evening. Yeah, I finished my dinner some time back, and yes, excited to speak with you today. And I was really looking forward to seeing you because when I saw your author profile, it connected because I'm also an electrical engineer by my background, just like you.
Oh, no kidding.
And yes, it's a very interesting coincidence, and I am also I also write, and I'm trying to get published. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting similarity between your journey and mine.
Oh, that is fantastic. Wow, we will have a great conversation. This is exciting. I didn't realize that. So it's always fun to meet other, engineers who are also authors.
Yes, we are a rare breed, I think. When I tell people, I mean, there are eyebrows that are raised, and people don't really believe it sometimes.
Yes,
So
I agree.
yeah. Great. Colin, so I think I just want to formally welcome you on behalf of myself and Story Zone, which is a community here based in Bangalore where we meet, we connect, and we create works of art, works of any sort of creative pursuits that we take up as community. And a book club is one of those. We have another engineer come author on the audience today, Anindita. She's
That's
part of our
great.
club. Yes, I think we are slowly going to build a community and take over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's only a matter of time.
It absolutely is. Yeah, who would have thought that a bunch of nerds are going around and thinking of taking over the world.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's exciting that you have this group and you have this book club. But it's a great thing to organize and do.
Yeah. Thank you, and thanks for accepting our invite to connect with us. And I appreciate you taking out the time this morning.
Oh, my pleasure. I always love talking about books, so it's great.
Right. I was going through your bio and it actually not the bio, the website, and it said that I can find you often editing what you've written, removing words, lines, passages, and rewriting it. And I think what was interesting that you mentioned was that whether it is your career in journalism or in as a communications consultant or as an author or as an engineer, I think you've found different ways of expressing and you find this pattern sort of sticking. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that people are often surprised. I find that, I mean, it doesn't matter what you're writing, whether you're writing as a journalist or you're writing a technical paper or you're writing a fictional story, you're still working with words, right? And while the goal of all three is very different, in the end, I find the skills of, taking out unnecessarily words and really just, fine tuning it down to the essentials is a skill
Right.
that applies across all of them, which
Right.
yeah, and I really enjoy, actually. I always talk about, how I really love, just taking out a whole paragraph and the satisfaction of that, because you know that you're getting down to the heart of the story every time you do that. Yeah.
So Colleen, tell us a little bit about how your journey began and how your association with books started. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so I grew up in Northern Ontario, Canada, like you already mentioned, and
Mhm.
I spent which is basically a lot of rocks and trees and wide open spaces. So I spent a lot of time outdoors, and essentially it's also a mining town. So there's a super stack where the refinery is, but our house was between the woods and the super stack. So whenever we're out in the woods, you know, um, so the rule was if you get lost, just find the super stack and walk towards it, and you'll get home. And so, which was true. And so I had a huge amount of freedom as a child to be able to wander out in the woods and just explore and do what I wanted to, which really led me to just to like to explore. And so in some ways I find that that sort of exploration also folds into the writing, because writing is ultimately exploration as well. When you're
Sure.
writing story, you're trying to find it, trying the right story. And so, yeah, I had, two older brothers, and my parents always read out loud to me. And I've always, always, always loved stories. I started writing poetry, I think, when I was in grade 8, and then wrote poetry throughout high school. I mean, I'm not going to say, whether it was good or bad, but, at least it was out there. And I've always journaled, through most of my life, just, talking about, writing about the day and what was going on. And then sometime when I was in my 20s, I was living out in Alberta, which is in Western Canada. And the Banff Center of Performing Arts had this writing sort of workshop weekend. And I just thought, I've always wanted to be a writer. And so I just submitted something and got accepted. And that was sort of the launching point that weekend with another group of authors, just discovering the joy of writing and creating and editing and the whole process. And that's sort of where it all began.
Interesting, very interesting. And are there any other writers in the family? You mentioned brothers. Anyone else that who's taken up a liking to this side?
Actually, I'm the only one. We have a lot of creative people. We have a lot of painters and a lot of musicians, and a lot of singers as well. But nobody else that actually does the writing, which is interesting. But I guess whatever your artistic outlet is, it's still an artistic outlet. Might just happen to be writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, no, I totally agree. I completely agree. And so, who was the person who you introduced, or who probably gave you your first book, or got you intrigued about reading? I mean, or did it just organically happen?
Well, I think my parents always read aloud to me before I could. And so there was this series, I think it was by Thornton W. Burgess, which was about just, yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with it, about animals in the woods. And I loved it. And so I think that probably must have been the starting point. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how old I was at the time, maybe 8 or 9 or even younger. And that certainly got me. And I always remember reading. And my family and I went and lived in France for a year when I was sometime around grade 6. And of course, we were immersed in the French language, and I didn't speak French language at the beginning. And so there was one English bookstore in this city of French-speaking people. And so that was sort of my go-to. That was the highlight of my week, was whenever we could make a trip to the bookstore and go get a book. So I think that really solidified my love of reading, would have been that year that we spent in a foreign country.
And do you remember your first visit to the library, or when you probably? I mean, I remember mine because I kind of did not want to come out of the library, and so do you have a anecdote like that?
Well, I find that interesting that you didn't want to leave, because I always find that there's a time warp when you go into a library. You go into maybe one thing, and then all of a sudden you come out an hour and a half later, and it's like you aren't even aware of time passing. That even happens to me now. But I do remember, this is a bit later, probably not my first time in the library, but being there as a teenager and being in the stacks, and it was quite, and then just the sense of, I came out with a stack of maybe 10 books, and I do remember that sense of just excitement and satisfaction as you're walking out of the library with this stack of books that you get to discover, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think all authors just love libraries. There's something magical about them.
I mean, I think as a youngster, libraries used to do the trick. Now, I think bookstores have gotten added to that list because I think there are some books you just need to have. So.
Yeah, but that you just need to have a copy just for your peace of mind, have it close by in case you need to read it, right? Yeah, I agree.
So my friends ask me, like, if you've read a book, then it's done. So why does it still have to stay in the house? And I don't know. I just tell them they're my books, and it's like, okay, what does that mean? What do you mean it's your book? So
yeah, and I find it more and more. I read ebooks just simply because they're very convenient. But I do love having a whole bookshelf of books in a room. It just seems to, I don't know, ground the room or yeah, it just makes you feel good.
Yeah. I bet that engineering books never felt this good, or were you equally enamored by the electrical engineering books?
Well, it's fun. So I have my cousin who's she's actually a biologist, but I remember describing to her once about how that that feeling when you're writing and you're really humming along and things are going great and the words are just flowing. that's the same thing that happens when for me, when I'm doing calculus. You get into the flow and things are just working and it's just all coming together. And it's the same. I don't know if it's the same part of the brain, but it all just seems to work. So I mean, I'm not necessarily engineering books because I'm not huge on details of engineering stuff, but certainly the beauty of the math and the physics, I find a parallel to the beauty of language in a way.
Oh, that's so beautiful to hear.
Yeah, not everybody thinks like that. I think it may just be, a few of us.
Yeah, I mean, no, first of all, I mean, being here, I don't feel like I'm an anomaly anymore. I feel normal-ish today. So thanks for making me feel that.
That's good. It's good to be in the same space here for all of us.
Yeah. Also, does technology also figure? I mean, I think I read somewhere, but technology does play a role in your books or the stuff that you write.
Yeah.
How does that marriage happen?
Well, essentially, I'm really fascinated with technology gone wrong. So, as engineers, we know the potential for that to happen, right? And throughout human history, we've had multiple times when, whether it's, the atomic bomb or DDT, or, you could even say the internet or social media, when there's unintended consequences of inventions, right? And so that's always fascinating me. And so certainly my first trilogy, the Gatherer series, is about that. It's about an energy device that has some unintended consequences. And certainly the fourth book that I'm working on now it's the same. It's a different, setting and a different technology and a different story. But I am always fascinated with that. What if you were that person who had made that invention? Like, where does your responsibility begin and end, and how would you deal with it? And it's so yeah, technology is definitely part of my work for sure.
Very interesting. And what's been the reaction of the readers? I mean, maybe your engineering friends as well as your non-engineering friends.
Well, it's funny because the readers that I'm most worried about is the engineers, of course, because they're going to be like, oh, well, that's not possible. You can't do that. Because they would be the most critical. So I'm always, which is funny that I'm always worried about them. But engineers aren't necessarily big readers. So most people are sort of, it makes them see the world in a different way in terms of electricity and of the electrical grid and energy and power. And that's music to my ears, because that's really part of what I'm trying to do, is for people to appreciate what a miracle it is, really, and how how much it underlies our society. So that's it depends on the person. Some people and they always talk about, oh yeah, and now I'm much more paranoid about walking by a transformer station or something, right? And yeah, so it's really funny. It's funny that people all of a sudden, are much more aware of the world around them, which is awesome.
Okay, interesting. Tell us a little bit more, if you don't mind, about the Gather series. I did read a little bit of an excerpt, but it'll be good to hear from you. Maybe a little bit about the characters and what the outline of the story is.
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned, it's about so what I'll do is I'll give you the pitch that I used. I went to I go to a conference every year, Thriller Fest, and initially when I got my contract and my agent, I used this is the pitch I used. So it's about Storm Freeman invents the Gatherer, and which brings infinite free energy to the world and ushers in this era of decadence and luxury like the world has never seen, until people start getting sick, including her. And that's essentially where the book begins, and she has to, or where the series begins, where she has to seek out and destroy what she created. And so it's really about her, looking at what it means to create something as miraculous as that, and and the notoriety and the fame, but then also to have that turnaround and then to start spreading an incurable disease throughout the population, and where would her responsibility begin and end, and what she would do. So it's about her journey as the inventor, but it's also about her sort of sidekick, which is Maria Kowalski, who's she's an ex-military, and she initially was supposed to stop Storm from releasing this device because they knew of the potential, the potential power of it, but also the potential danger of it because it hadn't been tested enough. And so it's sort of certainly at the beginning, the beginning book. It's sort of about their sort of conflict between the two of them coming together eventually to realize that they need to stop this. And then, but they have their own demons and their own relationships, and they've lost different people for different reasons, and so it all starts to play out as they try and put an end to the Gatherer. But because it's gotten out of their control, there's a lot of people who they are trying to stop them.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So does the narrative also explore the morality of things, maybe the politics associated with creating technology, and sort of does it get into those areas of gray and dark?
Yeah, ultimately it's about the characters up front, but obviously, I mean, it's about the story, but obviously all of that sort of are underlying themes that play out through the book, that, things are happening, and there's constant, and, it's part of the story that I like the best is that Canada is all of a sudden this superpower because we have this, and Canada, we're not really, that's not really our mode of operation normally, but because we are the owners of this device, all of a sudden it increases our stature in the world. So yes, there are sort of elements of that throughout the story. So like, if this device was created, how would it change the world, kind of thing.
Yeah, the Gatherer, the Disruptor, and the Storm, they're part of the same series, and it continues the story from one to the other, or these are different stories in each novel.
No, it's a continuum. So the Gatherer is the first one, and then the Disruptor is the second, and then it's essentially a trilogy at this point. And then the Storm is the final one that came out this year. The Storm can be read as a standalone. So if you just want the short version of the series, you can. It's a standalone, but I haven't. There's all sorts of offshoots that I could do from this series. There's all sorts of characters that I'd love to expand on or to follow their stories more. So I don't think the series is necessarily over.
Sure. And the fourth book the next book that you're mentioning, is that a segue from the same set of characters? Is it an offshoot, or it's a fresh franchise?
No, it's a new start. It'll be a different. It's going to look more into sort of human intelligence and brain-to-brain communication and brain-to-computer communication, and sort of the good and the bad and the ugly about that situation. And I have actually my main character for that one sort of arrived fully formed, so which is kind of nice. So it's exciting to see to see how she sort of navigates this world of when we're starting to expand on human connection and altering brains, and it's a fascinating and very, in some ways, horrific area, I find.
Yeah, and with the wave around artificial intelligence and everything going on around, I think it's a very timely selected or chosen plot.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's all connected, right? How our sort of research into human intelligence is all part of this drive to try and mimic it, which is a challenging task for sure. Yeah.
What's your creative process and what's your writing style? I mean, what do you tend to be more prosaic, or you use humor, and how do you set the plot and the subplots and the the red herrings or whatever, the elements that actually add a thrill beyond the base story that you're narrating, which itself has a lot of twists and turns. So just help us understand how that works.
Yeah, so I mean, as you probably all know, there's there's plotters, and then there's pantsers, or there's people who plot ahead of time or just follow the storyline. And I definitely thought as an engineer that I would be a plotter, that I would want to lay it all at the time, but I am not. I am actually a pantser. So I sort of start with I work with a writing coach, and so I start with what she calls the sacred image, which is sort of this, that gut feeling you have about a story, about the sort of the power of it that you want to convey. Right. And then you just there and you just write and follow the story. And so I work with her every 2 weeks. So I write a bunch of stuff, and then I send it off to her, and she gives feedback. And then sometimes I'll circle back and make the edits to the bits that I've submitted, but other times I'll just keep going. And so then we could kind of have this perpetual circling back kind of process. Mm-hmm. So that by the time I'm done the first draft, it's actually like, the 10th draft, because I've gone back so much. Which I kind of like, because then there's sort of, you've got something a bit more solid by the end of that process. But of course, there's tons of editing, right? And then you have to go back and make sure, whatever chapter 1 matches, whatever happened in chapter 1 matches chapter 9, and then put in the subplots, and then put in like the subtle hints of foreshadowing that, the reader doesn't necessarily recognize until the end of the book, and all that stuff. So it's, it's a long process. I think the way I do it is possibly a longer process than if I plotted it ahead of time, but that just seems to be the way my brain works. Yeah.
I totally understand that and relate to that.
Well, and I think that that feeling you get when all of a sudden your brain comes up with this idea and you go off down this different path that you weren't expecting. Like that is one of the moments that keeps us writing, right? That
Yeah.
moments when you're like, oh, wow, I can do this and it totally fits. And yeah, like I absolutely love that feeling.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Like the last piece of a jigsaw, which just magically just sits there in the place in
Yeah.
its place, and
Yeah.
it makes everything else make sense.
That's right. And then it helps you get through all those tough times when you're not really sure where the plot's going to go and you kind of feel a bit lost. But those little
Yes.
moments definitely keep you going. What kind of stories do you write?
I've done a little bit of poetry. I do theater, so I've written some plays for the stage.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and then I've recently finished my first novel, which is a fiction. It's a tale of a lot of misfits trying to make it through the world. So
Oh, nice.
uh, yeah,
Yeah.
just exploring subjects which sort of
Wow. I love books like that, like when it's all about the people and how they don't quite fit. But I mean, in reality, there's so many people like that in the world that it's fascinating to explore who they are and their stories. And oh, that sounds wonderful.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you so much. I'm trying to get this published. In India, I mean, I think I have a lead on a publisher, but I'm trying to still figure out how to go about publishing in the US because I do want it to get published in the US as well. So we'll see. It's a long journey.
Yeah.
But the reason I mentioned that was because I wanted to understand from you from the time when you put together the manuscript for The Gatherer, which was the first book in the series, to the time it actually hit the shelves, the bookshelves. How was that journey like for you?
Huh. That's actually an interesting story. So yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I had gone to Pitch Fest, which is part of Thriller Fest, and I had gone in 2015 maybe, and I submitted. I think 8 agents or editors said yes, but ultimately nobody said yes to the manuscript eventually. So then I went back 2 years later to the same conference and did Pitch Fest again with this new story with The Gatherer. And so I pitched, and but one of the people I pitched to was an editor. So I had a whole bunch of people, I think maybe 9 people say yes again. And then within a month of the conference, an editor had gotten back to me and said, can you send me I'd love to see the first 30 pages. And then she took the 30 pages and then she came back with some comments and suggestions. And so then I worked and made all those suggestions that she had. And then I sent it back to her again. And then I guess it was probably it was coming up to the next conference. So it was almost a year later, and I hadn't heard from her. So I had kind of given up on the whole process. And then a few weeks before I was going to the conference again, she said, I got an email saying, we'd like to offer you to publish your first book, which of course was, yeah, very fantastic. And especially because it wasn't an agent. This was actually an editor at Kensington Publishing. So I was just over the moon. And then I still went to the conference, and while I was there, I got a call. I had a call with the editor, and they changed it so they offered me a 3-book deal for the whole series. So I was ecstatic, obviously. So I spent that. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those moments when as a writer that you have to remember. And then I spent So I spent that Pitch Fest actually looking for an agent, saying, okay, I've got this deal. And of course, it's, it's the one, as everyone said, it's that one time in a writer's life when you're actually in control of the process, right? It doesn't normally happen that way. Yeah. And so I ended up, and I came home with an agent and a publishing contract. And then I worked with the publisher, and that process was actually fairly easy. We just worked back and forth because I'd already sort of been working with the editor and knew her, and then the first one came out in 2019. Yeah, so I guess yeah. But if you want the full story on so what happened is they were starting up a new science fiction imprint as a sort of a smaller subset of their normal offering. And so the first one came out, and then we're somewhere just before we just finished the edits of the second one. They decided to close down their science fiction imprint. So so then I was what's called orphaned, which means I didn't have a publisher anymore or an editor, even though I had these books out. So I spent so crushing, so disappointing. But then I spent about a year getting the rights back from Kensington Publishing. And then I have self-published all the books again. So the first two were both. The first two were traditional and self-published, and then the third one is just strictly self-published. So yeah, the publishing world is crazy. It's you absolutely never know what's going to happen. And you put so much effort in writing it, you sort of feel, I always feel sort of this obligation to my earlier self for working so hard on the book that I need to continue, right? I can't just stop, because that would be, unfair to the part of me that put in so much work to begin with. And it is, I mean, it is a lot of work. It's you just have to recognize that that's just part of it.
Was there a moment when, after the books got published, maybe your early readers, maybe feedback from your family, friends, tell me maybe the first reaction that you got, or a review that you got, how did it make you feel?
Oh, well, it's, reviews are a mixed bag, right? You get good ones, you get bad ones. But in terms of, yeah, like especially because when it was first traditionally published, when I got my first review from Publishers Weekly and then from the Library Journal. And so, all these reviews that you've been reading over the years, and then finally it's your book that's being reviewed by these organizations, I kind of didn't believe it, actually. It took a long time for that to sink in, that I had actually created something that was sort of part of the publishing world and was getting, some recognition. And then The Gatherer was nominated for a Kobo Rakuten award for I can't remember, was it for speculative fiction, and that recognition actually really took me by surprise. And so that was a bit, the validation is wonderful, because it's, it just gives you sort of a reason to keep going, and recognition that people are reading your story and that they like it, and that, I mean, obviously not everybody's going to like it, but that they are, reading it. And that's, to me, that's the exciting part, that people are reading it. Like, it's wonderful.
In specifically, what was the reaction of your husband?
Well, my husband's not a reader, so that was he actually took a while to read it, and he's a very slow, methodical, detailed reader. So he was a very tough audience, actually, and but he quite liked it. He was very supportive, but he's also very, the storm, each, as an author, each book gets better. So the third book is the strongest and the one I'm most proud of. And, he sort of reflects that. He's sort of, he's very supportive, but at the same time, he's also like, yeah, I think this is your best book yet, and yada, yada, yada. So it was great. It's good to have someone in your corner, for sure. He's very supportive, because, as you know, the ups and downs of the writing world are extreme. So it's good to have somebody to remind you about the good parts.
What I've also realized, Colleen, which is very, very heartening, actually, is I started doing these author connects like we are doing today, these chats, and I've been speaking to authors from across the world, and just understanding how they went about things, what their life story has been, what their books are about, what their processes are. And the kind of support I'm seeing from the author community across the world, that's just so touching and overwhelming, because, I mean, I didn't expect that other authors would be tagging me or posting about my books or my work, or even just sort of giving a shout out sometimes. I think these small gestures go a long way in terms of reassuring and reaffirming the faith in the sort of the goodness and the kindness that is around. And I think that just keeps you going, and keeps you feeling happy and motivated all the time.
Yeah. I totally agree with you that's sort of the best part of being an author, is that community you get with other authors, and the support, and just talking to your own people, right? Like, who are quite happy to talk about writing and books for hours on end, and don't start glazing over like our family members might, and but yeah, and also very supportive. And I find the longer you are in the writing world, the more you understand how important it is just to support each other. And that's sort of why we're all here. And it's other people are going to have success sometimes, and you're going to have success sometimes, but it's just all part of the same experience. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really, really didn't expect this. So this warmth has caught me by surprise, and I'm glad for it, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's amazing. It must be fascinating for you to talk to authors from all over the world, to see the sort of the similarities of experience, but also then the differences of experience and the different stories. Like, that's a great initiative. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, just that the sort of the joy of connection, it just helps you keep going, right? And it's
Yeah.
there's a lot of very generous authors out there, especially some of the very successful ones can be very generous and help you and just giving you little tips along the way that can save you so much time and make such a huge
Right.
difference. Yeah.
Right. 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 If you were to impart a word of advice or wisdom to people who are readers or who are trying to write something, what would be your your parting words of wisdom?
Well, this is actually a good segue from what we were just talking about. And because I was thinking you had sort of sent some questions ahead of time, and I've been thinking about it. And I think it's just to remember why you started writing in the first place. It's for the love of writing. It's for the love of story. And that's why we're here. We didn't come so that we didn't start writing so that we could, do social media and, get and promote, and, network and do all the things you're supposed to do as an author. And sometimes it's easy to lose sight of the work when you get sort of drawn into all the promotion and all the marketing and whatnot. And so when you feel just to focus on the work, focus on the art and the joy of creating and what brought you to the work to begin with. That's sort of what keeps me sane. And also that I don't know if you're so my husband used to train long distance athletes, so endurance athletes. So there's actually a lot of similarities between endurance athletes and novelists because they both take a long time and you're often working on your own for long periods of time. But when you're an athlete, your body gets accustomed to that regular exertion, to the endorphins and to the adrenaline that happens. Because you're doing it on a regular basis. So maybe you find this as well, that when you're writing regularly, that your brain gets used to that as well, to the creative process, to whatever you're releasing in your brain when you're doing that creative process. Yes. And so that's my whole thing, is just go to that place where you're humming along, where you experience the joy of writing, and then everything else will fall into place.
A very, very interesting parallel that you've drawn, and I never thought of it that way. See, one more perspective that I wouldn't have stumbled upon myself.
Yeah, well, and I never would have thought of it either if my husband wasn't doing that. And then all of a sudden, there's so many parallels to, especially endurance athletes who are working on their own so much, and novelists spend a lot of time working on their own. Sure. Yeah, similar challenges for sure. And also, you're kind of working towards this goal that, whether it's to complete the book or to, compete in some race that's very, very far in the distance. So, and sometimes feels like nobody in the world cares about. So it's, it's just a matter of keeping going.
Yes. Yeah. And ideas come up at weird places. I mean, sometimes I just don't understand. Like, I'm filling fuel in the car and then suddenly an idea strikes you. And like, what do? I mean, I have to finish this action that I'm in the middle of.
That's right. Before you write it down. I find it interesting that you also have written some plays, and that must sort of feed into your writing process as well, and your discipline in that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. But there are certain things which are so universal when I speak with authors, and one of them is for sure random places where ideas and inspirations greet you. So everyone has, like, one of the authors I interviewed, she mentioned that she has a waterproof writing pad in her shower because that's where her ideas come, and her husband nicely got that installed because said, okay, I mean, it's dangerous for you to run out and write something, so there's a waterproof writing pad there, and she can just jot down her ideas there.
Wow.
And I was like, that's being supportive, I think.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, because sometimes you can't write it down, and then you're like, oh no, I'm going to lose it. And I love that. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah, and it's always when you're doing something else, when you're cooking or cleaning or walking, and then all of a sudden your brain's just like. And it's funny too, because I've actually gotten to the point where I actually will consciously say to my subconscious, okay, you need to work on this problem overnight, and so that tomorrow morning that we can, figure out what needs to happen next. and sort of acknowledging that your brain is still working on it when you're busy doing other stuff. Yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least I sort of put it out there. I'm like, okay, go do your job.
Yes, I mean, I have had nights where I have, I was writing something in the evening or before I went to bed, and then I mean the development of the plot doesn't stop just because you're sleeping, and and I wake up with a story or a fuller story than I was ready with when I slept. So yes, the mind does work, and I guess we'll find some of these interesting quirks of the brain in your next book.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I know. And that's the thing, is it's such a huge topic. I mean, I am interested myself to see where it goes, because, I want to sort of explore that whole business of, trying to, improve human intelligence, when I think it's all potentially already right in front of us. We don't Anyway, so it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Of course, lots of research, because that's certainly the Gatherer series is kind of in my field. So I didn't have to do a ton of research.
Sure.
But yeah, this one's going to take some research, so I can, make it sound, authentic and know what I'm talking about. But, we, as authors, we all love to do research. So
Yes, yes, absolutely we do.
yeah.
It's been lovely speaking with you, Colin. I think unfortunately we're at the end of our time.
All right.
We've actually overshot a little bit. Sorry for keeping you for so
Oh,
long.
okay.
But thank you. I really, really appreciate you speaking with me and taking out the time and also sharing such fun anecdotes and experiences that have really, really made my evening full of smiles. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. It's been lovely talking to you, and I will keep in touch on Instagram so I can see what you are up to and get updates from you. But thank you very much. This has been wonderful. It's always great to talk to other authors.
Thank you. Nice connecting with you, and please do hit me up if you're ever in India, and be happy to meet you and show you around.
Likewise. All right. Well, take care.
Okay. Thank you, Colin, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.